John Gotti spent last Christmas Eve at the Ravenite Social Club on Mulberry Street in Manhattan. It had been 9 days since the murder of Paul Castellano, 3 weeks since the death of Agnello Della Croce, 2 departures that eliminated the reputed leadership of the Gambino crime family. 200 men circulated through the club that night, according to John Gurney, a New York City police detective who was doing surveillance. At a detention hearing for Gotti earlier this year, Gurney recalled how visitors greeted Gotti outside the club that night. "I saw numerous people bypass others standing on the street, go directly to John and kiss John," Gurney said. The respect accorded to him was more than usual, more than the times before I had seen him there. It was very similar to the respect accorded to Agnello Della Croce. And so, for mob watchers, the ascension of John Gotti was complete. It had been recorded by a member of law enforcement. Organized crime has occupied a place in American mythology for most of this century, and a large part of its lore stems from its organization. The Cosa Nostra has proven that murderers, loan sharks, and extortionists can form a group as structured as any company on the New York Stock Exchange. It is an ordered society in which a man like John Gotti, who authorities say had risen through the ranks and proven his worth, could emerge as the man to whom all others in his family would defer. He is, law enforcement authorities believe, the new boss. The Cosa Nostra family is, by all accounts, a club of rituals, of rank, and of respect for superiors. At the top is the boss, who does not participate in the day-to-day activities of the organization, but receives a percentage of all the family's earnings. The underboss is the boss's second, sometimes being groomed to succeed the boss, but not always. The consigliere assists the boss, frequently acting as an ombudsman for family members, but has no leadership authority. He is generally an older, experienced member who can advise family members and settle disputes within the family. The structure of the Cosa Nostra extends down from there. Captains, or capos, supervise the family's operations and represent the family among the soldiers in their crew or regime. A capo gains his position by proving his ability as an earner. He may have his own ventures, retaining part of the income before passing on a share to the leadership. The number of capos depends on the size of the family. The basic rank in the family is the soldier. He is made by undergoing the initiation ritual and being sworn to secrets, something that happens only after someone has proven his worth as an associate and has been sponsored by a made member. The Cosa Nostra is an exclusive club. Only men of Italian ancestry are offered membership, and there is a long waiting list. An informal but critical family role. The most common position in organized crime belongs to those who are not actual members but are associates. It is an informal position but critical to the family. An associate need not be of Italian descent. He is someone whose skills or position make him of value to the organization. Some are used as soldiers, while others are more distantly connected. The FBI has estimated that for every formal member of the Cosa Nostra, there are 10 criminal associates who cooperate with members and share their enterprise. In testimony before the President's Commission on Organized Crime last January, Martin Light, a former mob lawyer now serving a prison term for heroin possession, gave a description of one crew belonging to a reputed member of the Colombo family. The crew are the people that are on record throughout organized crime as working for Greg Scarpa. Whatever they do, everyone knows that they are part of Greg Scarpa's crew, and Greg Scarpa is part of the Colombo family. Joseph Pistone, an FBI agent who infiltrated and gained prominence in the Bonanno family, testified at the so-called Pizza Connection case in federal court about a conversation he had with Benjamin Ruggiero, the soldier to whom he reported. He said, "From now on, anything that you do regarding any activities, illegal or legally, you have to go through me, and I've got to approve them, and if you do them, you have to share all your proceeds with me." In times of expanding membership, a crime family can take on the structure of an Amway distribution network. Just recently, Light said, they opened up the books, and they started to make new members. They remained part of the crew of the soldier who they were always with, and then as they get more experience and branch out on their own, they develop their own crews. Some captains are very active, so they will go around. Like, there could be a captain that could have 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 10 soldiers in his group, in his crew, and each soldier has his own crew. So the captain would stop in the various clubs to see what's doing, to see if any money was made, to get his end, to supervise, see if there are any problems. The trickle-up theory of cash flow. For the average soldier, loan sharking remains the bread and butter of his living. Most have jobs with legitimate businesses set up by other members, but they do not work at those jobs regularly. More time is spent on the street, making the rounds, collecting loan shark payments, and endlessly plotting deals, according to experts. There is no routine to the life of the soldier, except that he will make regular appearances at the bars and social clubs frequented by other members of his family. Money filters up through the ranks, so that a soldier who is a good earner, whose associates make a lot of money for him, may be in line for promotion. How much is passed from soldiers to captains to underbosses and bosses varies. He's supposed to do the right thing, said Light, who spent years as an intimate of some reputed Colombo family members, but was not permitted to become a member, because he was not Italian. What is the right thing, depending on who the soldier is? If you make 10,000 and you pass up 5, that's very nice. That's doing the right thing. What if you pass up a little amount and the boss finds out you made a big score? Light was asked at the hearing. Shame on you, he said. You're in trouble. What kind of trouble is that? It depends on how much money is involved. I mean, you don't get killed for something like that, but you could get slapped around, you could get a beating, you could be abused verbally in front of other people. Everything in organized crime is respect. Dealings between families always involve members of equal rank. Within a given family, a boss deals exclusively with his consigliere and underboss, from whom the captain gets his orders. Thus, several buffers are created between the lowest and highest levels of the family. In the event of a dispute, a sit-down would be called. In some instances, if the issue involves secrecy or honor, the loser of the sit-down might be ordered killed. Pistone testified about some of the rules of the ranks, as explained by Ruggiero. As an associate, I should never raise my hand to a made guy. I could not get into an argument with a made guy. He also said that a made guy's word is his contract, and that any dealings that I had, I would have to share with Ruggiero or whatever partner the made guy has. An example of the way the earnings of an organized crime crew are shared with the superiors came out at a trial of reputed members of the Gambino family in Manhattan. Dominic Montiglio, a convicted felon who served as driver for his uncle, Anthony Nino, a reputed Gambino capo, testified that he attended regular Friday night meetings at a social club where the proceeds of a car theft ring were divvied up. The money was put in a box and taken on Monday nights to his uncle's house, and then on Thursday mornings, he testified that Nino would meet Paul Castellano. Frederick Dinome took the stand that January day, like a man hauling secrets soaked in gasoline, ready to ignite the moment someone struck a match. Calm, maybe even a little cold, he stared across the courtroom and dropped a bomb. My brother Richard, he said, he had to bring a cut of our money, up the hill. The prosecutors perked up. They knew what was coming, but the jury didn't yet. So they leaned in, let it hang in the air like a loaded gun. Up the hill? One of them asked, playing it casual. Did you learn what he meant by that? Frederick didn't flinch. Yes, sir. And what was that? That was Mr. Castellano's house, he said, like it was just any other address in Staten Island, but everyone in that courtroom knew better. This wasn't just a house. This was the house, a fortress on Tot Hill, the palace of the boss. "Do you know why it was called the Hill?" came the next question. "Because he lived in Tot Hill in Staten Island." Simple, straight. But the implication was massive. The stolen cars, the chopped parts, the paper bags of cash, it all rolled uphill to Big Paul. Then came the numbers. Dynome talked money like it was just the weather. Unpredictable, but always coming. Sometimes it was 14,000, he said, his voice flat. Sometimes it was 20,000, sometimes it was 8. It varied. And then, almost like a footnote, he added, "There were also some weeks we didn't get any money, because we didn't have all the cars finished." He said it like he was talking about assembling lawnmowers, not running $1 million car theft ring with its own tribute system. But that was the thing with guys like Dynome. They lived in a world where crime was just another business, and business, in the shadow of Tot Hill, always paid tribute to the top. He says, "One meet down, and I gotta go to another meet right away." He's disgusted with construction. He said, "They called a commission meet for construction." I can't believe it. That's all they talk about is money. Money, money, money. Angelo Ruggiero, quoting Agnello Della Croce, the late reputed underboss of the Gambino crime family, on a federal wiretap, January 26, 1983. Later this month, when prosecution witnesses in a Manhattan courtroom begin telling what they know about the men alleged to be the royal heads of the city's organized crime families, the public can expect to see the most dramatic portrayal of the Cosa Nostra since The Godfather. Insiders will testify about murder and extortion and union racketeering. Mobsters will be heard on wiretaps discussing business in their cryptic, arcane way. Spectators will hear of gangsters being whacked out, of envelopes being passed to bosses and underbosses. The story of the Cosa Nostra in New York will be laid out with prosecutorial fanfare and by star witnesses from the ranks of the underworld. By linking organized crime families in a racketeering indictment, prosecutors hope to put the Godfather mystique on trial. But while much of the courtroom drama will center on murder and mayhem, as the FBI describes one area of interest for organized crime, a broad theme will be the mob's influence over the business of the city. It will all come down to money. Money, money, money. In accusing the leaders of New York's 5 crime families of operating under the guidance of a ruling commission, U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani's office will argue that organized crime derives income from a range of illegitimate sources, and that New Yorkers, more than residents and business people in other cities, are paying the price. In recent years, as prosecution of organized crime figures has accelerated, more attention has been focused on the costs of their industry, ranging from the inflated price tag of New York City's high-rise building boom to the corruption of labor unions, whose members suffer the consequences of collusion between union leaders and management, to new enterprises such as stock manipulation and credit card fraud. Beyond dollars, some experts contend, organized crime's historical involvement in activities such as drug trafficking and corruption of public officials pulls at the fabric of society. The central concern is not that it's violent, which it is, or that it's corrupting government processes and individuals, said Robert Blakey, a law professor at the University of Notre Dame, who helped write the Federal Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the basis for the upcoming prosecutions. What it ultimately represents is a political challenge to the rule of law. As long as they are organized in a relatively sophisticated way and capable of using violence as a means of advancing their goals, they are a threat to society's writ. They are truly outside the law. Apart from philosophical arguments, there have been efforts of late to quantify the influence of the Cosa Nostra. Federal investigators say New York's organized crime families have shown remarkable skill at following the dollar, identifying emerging markets and cutting themselves into the profits. The city's booming construction industry, which prosecutors say has been heavily influenced by organized crime's domination of concrete suppliers, is one example. It also shows how far the Cosa Nostra has come since the days when mobsters catered mainly to illegal markets like gambling and loan sharking. The President's Commission on Organized Crime, which concluded its work earlier this year, asked Wharton Econometric Forecasting Associates to assess the economic impact of organized crime in America. The Wharton organization, noted for analyzing and predicting traditional economic patterns, estimated that the nation's organized crime families will generate $47 billion of income this year, over 1% of the gross national product. That places it at about the combined level of all U.S. metal producers, including the steel industry, and ahead of the rubber and tire industry. According to the Wharton analysts, organized crime is one of the nation's leading employers, providing nearly 500,000 crime-related jobs. Besides such traditional enterprises as loan sharking, drug trafficking, and extortion, the mob is involved in more than a dozen areas of legitimate business, ranging from organized crime staples such as construction and waste removal, to lesser-known areas such as auto repair and business services, and whatever the business, when organized crime is involved, family leaders take their cut, increasing the prices of goods ranging from chickens to office buildings. Little of the income derived from such employment is taxed. Wharton estimated conservatively that if all organized crime income were taxed, the burden on the rest of the country would be about $6.5 billion less. Wharton also figured that organized crime activity will cause an increase of 0.3% in consumer prices this year, a loss of 414,000 jobs, and a reduction of disposable income of $77 for each man, woman, and child in the United States. But the chief executive officers of organized crime are not required to file annual reports, and some experts are skeptical of these figures. One of them, Peter Reuter, a senior economist at the Rand Corporation and the author of a book, Disorganized Crime, argues that the Cosa Nostra is not as dominant as some people think. The famous Meyer-Lansky line, "We're bigger than U.S. Steel," completely overstates their standing, Reuter said. The fact that they always seem able to choose the Teamsters president is of some concern, but the problem of organized crime is less acute than it was 50 years ago, or even 25 years ago. Reuter is not one who disputes the existence of the Cosa Nostra. He says, however, that its influence is confined to a few industries in a few cities, construction in New York, for example. In Los Angeles, he said, there are a lot of scummy people, but we don't think the construction industry is significantly influenced by racketeers. Criminologists, sociologists, and economists may debate the mob's dominance, but they agree that it influences several legitimate industries in the New York area. And in some of these, the cost has been significant. On Long Island, several men associated with organized crime were named in a 1984 indictment charging shared control of the private carting industry in Nassau and Suffolk counties. It is not clear how much this control cost the carters' customers, but Ronald Goldstock, head of the state's organized crime task force, testified before the Presidential Commission that carters were kicking back at least $400,000 annually to two men named in the commission indictment, reputed Lucchese family boss Anthony Corallo and the late Paul Castellano, called boss of the Gambino crime family by law enforcement officials. State investigators in a Jaguar owned by Salvatore Avellino, a reputed soldier in the Lucchese family, captured conversations that indicated the money flowing up to the bosses was increasing regularly. Avellino was delivering so much cash that the envelopes he brought to mob commission meetings in restaurants were becoming too fat to carry discreetly. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. Avellino is heard telling Thomas Ronger, a Suffolk carter, "I can't even carry them. Everybody's doing good, knock on wood, everybody's doing good. Let's hope we can keep it going for the next 15 to 20 years." The key to much of organized crime's influence is organized labor. Some theorize that one reason mobsters have been so successful in New York is that it is a city of unions. By dominating the leadership of unions representing longshoremen, laborers, and truckers, the Cosa Nostra has played a key role in manipulating those industries. Common tactics include selling labor peace to companies and using the threat of union organizing to extort money. In support of an indictment charging reputed members of the Lucchese crime family with racketeering at Kennedy Airport, FBI agent William Carden, quoting a confidential source, said, "Since the margin of profit of a small trucker is not sufficient to support a totally unionized workforce, small truckers, in order to keep their employees from joining Teamsters Local 295, are forced into the arms of organized crime figures, who, for a price, keep the union from organizing their workforce. Organized crime's domination of laborers' locals has helped it control the concrete pouring business in the city, and consequently, the booming construction industry." Federal indictments and testimony before the Presidential Commission describe a system in which large jobs have been reserved for a group of 6 contractors called the Club. Authorities say those contractors have paid 2% of the gross price of their contracts in tribute to the 4 organized crime families controlling the club. This system is among the reasons construction costs more in New York than in other places. The Presidential Commission estimated mob influence has inflated the cost by 20%, and many organized crime experts believe that the prohibitive cost of concrete is one of the main reasons. The cost of concrete in Manhattan, $85 a cubic yard, is by far the most expensive in the nation, according to a survey done by Newsday last year. Anthony Salerno, the reputed boss of the Genovese Cosa Nostra family, who is also a defendant in the commission case, and 13 of his alleged associates were indicted by a federal grand jury earlier this year on charges they rigged bids for major high-rise concrete jobs. Levying the mob tax. In effect, Blakey says, the mob levies its own taxes on goods and services. Besides rigging bids, it can use labor to extort money from companies or force them to put family members or associates on the payroll in jobs that require little or no work. In June, 9 men reputed to be high-ranking members of the Colombo crime family were convicted of, among other things, demanding and receiving payments of up to $125,000 from building contractors who depended on unions controlled by the family, and in an affidavit filed with an application for a wiretap of the Palmer Boys Social Club in Manhattan in 1983. FBI agent Joseph Keating quoted a source as saying that Ralph Scopo, then president of the District Council of Cement and Concrete Workers and a reputed soldier in the Colombo family, collected kickbacks. Scopo, too, is a defendant in the commission case. The FBI source said Scopo kept 25% of the money, gave another 25% to his captain, and the rest to the family bosses. A similar arrangement has evolved in the city's garment industry, a $13.8 billion business which, over the years, has had a symbiotic relationship with organized crime. Members of the Cosa Nostra have allegedly been instrumental in providing garment manufacturers with sweetheart labor. Contracts, if not union-free labor, and quick cash, albeit at usurious rates. The result, the Presidential Commission estimated, is an extra $138 million a year in the wholesale cost of clothing made in New York. If much of mob involvement in industry flows from labor racketeering, the biggest losers may be the smallest players, the workers. "It's not free collective bargaining," said Blakey, who has studied labor racketeering. The classic case was Teamsters Local 560 in New Jersey, where Anthony Provenzano looted the union. There were high salaries, no-show jobs. The union was stolen. There was no credit union. That's a small, tangible way the workers were affected. And if you wanted to complain, you might be beaten up. You don't have the option of calling the police. You have the option of going along. You want to understand the mob? You don't start with the blood or the guns. You start with the words. The low, scratchy voices caught on tape in smoky backrooms, the courtroom confessions, the off-the-record bravado spilled over espresso. Because when wise guys talk, the truth leaks out between the cracks. And when do they talk about unions? That's where the real business was. Salvatore Santoro wasn't just another soldier. He was the reputed underboss of the Lucchese family, a man who moved envelopes and people with equal efficiency. In 1983, the State Organized Crime Task Force bugged him, and what they caught wasn't a threat or a confession. It was a lesson in seduction, mob style. "The only way I can talk to Doug," Santoro said, his voice a low murmur on tape. "I gotta get him alone, just him and I." He wasn't talking muscle. He was talking finesse. Bribery wasn't a shove. It was a whisper. "I gotta tell him, Doug, look, you know what life all is about? Not you, me, but your children. To leave them a bundle of money." It was never about now. It was about legacy. About making scores, quiet deals that nobody had to know about if Doug would just pay attention. That's how they worked. They didn't knock down doors. They walked in with a smile and left with your future. In 1984, Harold Kaufman, federal informer, insider, and not exactly a fan of subtlety, put it plain. You want to know how someone like Bernard Adelstein, a 5-foot-tall Jewish guy with a wooden leg, managed to organize the entire garbage industry in New York? Anybody who thinks that a 5-foot Jew with a wooden leg could organize the garbage industry without Carlo Gambino and his approval, Kaufman snapped, I would like to sell them a bridge. The crowd laughed. The committee didn't, because behind the sarcasm was something deadly serious. Nothing moved in the city without the green light from the top of the 5 families. Even your trash was mobbed up. By 1983, the bugs were everywhere. In the ceilings, in the phones, even in the lamps. And when 2 Lucchese soldiers, Salvatore Avellino and Richie De Luca, started talking about Peter Vario, the nephew of Paul Vario, a heavy in the laborers' local 66 out in Melville, they didn't realize the State Organized Crime Task Force was listening in real time. "He's telling me the union is his," Avellino grumbled. "You know." De Luca didn't let him finish. "So I'm saying, what do you mean, the union is yours?" "The union, nothing is yours." And then it got real. "Everything is the boss's," Avellino said, "and we only got the privilege of working it or running it." De Luca nodded. "You operate at his pleasure." That was the rule. You could sit in the chair, hold the title, collect the dues, but never forget it wasn't yours. It belonged to him, the boss. And even the cleanest union was dirty, soaked in tribute and blood, running at the pleasure of the man behind the curtain. 90% of the time? Maybe more. That's how it worked. From garment factories to garbage routes to labor halls in Long Island. The mob didn't just own the streets. They owned the unions. And if you listened close enough, they'd tell you that themselves.